continuing to play the game. So we've designed the whole ecosystem as this never existed before we stepped in. Now, when it comes to our background, I used to work at Google, managed $100 million for the company as a strategist. I crossed over to Facebook to become a science partner. So that's measuring the true value of ads and how they influence people in games, Instagram, etc. Sounds way more creepy than it is. It was actually a mixture of a science and a consultancy role. And outside of work, I would develop my own mobile games. I taught myself animation, coding, sound design, game design, etc. Massive gamer, so I decided to learn how to make them. I also am a massive fan of jazz-influenced hip-hop. So you're probably aware of Madlib, Jay Dilla, soulful music. Exactly. And I used to produce that since I was 14 years old. Not so much now, busy scaling AudioMob with Wilfrid. But what I started doing is I started streaming this music that I was making and that of the artists I'd listen to into the games that I would make. Met Wilfrid at a Google Christmas party back in 2017, and we started trying to identify audio ads. Could this be a non-intrusive way to monetize our players? And this grew into something much more. Now, there's a lot of good news about AudioMob right now, if you Google us. However, it wasn't always, flowers and roses. When I was developing games, and I'm going to show you, this is the first time I've shown this video in public, I spent years building my own games. That studio failed, but it produced something much, much greater, which is now AudioMob. So this is an example of the first pitch, which was a 10K pitch. It's a little snippet.
The mobile video gaming industry is one of the fastest growing digital mediums in the world, and as someone who produces and listens to jazz and hip hop music, there is too much stuff that doesn't get enough recognition. You see, I've always had a passion for music production and gaming, and one day I figured out how to produce video games of my own, and this is when I started telling music producers about an idea. I mean, if gaming is such a fast growing medium, why not implement jazz and hip hop producers' music within these games and then promote them? The more I pitched this idea, the more support I received from across the globe. Hours have been invested into the Tricks Jazz Chill Out gaming series, games dedicated to relaxing players and promoting indie jazz-influenced hip-hop producers.
So that was an example of the first pitch. I got support, not enough to raise a round, but it did spawn an idea that grew into AudioMob. And this is the nuggets of information that I want to kind of convey today. One of the key things is egoless learning. So it's okay not knowing what you need to know in order to raise money, in order to become the best CEO that can deploy millions of dollars. It's completely fine. And it sometimes gets a little nerve-wracking, to be honest, when you're expected to know so much. But the idea is that you've got to figure out how your mind works, how to learn how to learn. There are so many different CEOs that weren't experts in their specific space that became experts because they figured out how to learn and they took ego out of the whole situation. So it's a really, really key thing that I've adopted, Wilfrid's adopted, and it's in the ethos and culture of our company. Approach life as if there wasn't a ceiling. Failing is okay. If you shoot for the moon and fail on the way to shooting for the moon, you're still going to achieve something amazing. $110 million valuation, 14 million raised. I actually failed, believe it or not. I targeted $150 million valuation. But again, we didn't achieve the target, but it's still groundbreaking for a Series A startup. And that leaves me with the final quote before I pass on to Wilfrid. You can achieve great things even when failing in pursuit of an extraordinary goal. Thank you, and I'll pass over to Wilfrid.
Hello everyone, how's everyone doing? This is good energy, come on guys. Alright, so Christian, thanks for that, because really gave a background of how we actually started AudioMob, and I think sometimes what's really important to talk about is what kind of sparked that imagination. So I was born and raised in Wembley, northwest London. My parents used to live in the Chalk Hill Council estate. We moved to another estate in Wembley. But for me, that was never really important. What was really important was something that I learned from my uncle. So my uncle on the left-hand side, I know people say I kind of got some of his family resemblance and features. He was born and raised in Ghana. He got a scholarship directly to Oregon University in the United States, and he ended up working at NASA. And the picture on the right-hand side is two of his colleagues posing in front of one of the scientific instruments at NASA that he was working on with them. So for me, that was always my North Star, what was capable, what you could actually achieve. And I always wanted to be able to build things. What I cared about was problem solving. That's what I really cared about. And that's when I met Christian and he was working with Trick Jazz Studios and it was Jukebox, and then we ended up pivoting. And so I want to talk about the beginning of what I actually was looking for and what I was trying to create ended up fueling what we ended up doing, which was we pivoted from using music and streaming jazz music into games into actually serving audio ads. And that came from my background and Christian's background at Google, where I started my career at JP Morgan and Goldman Sachs. But the way I did that is I realized very quickly one of the most important things was experience. Like, no matter what everyone told you, going to university was great. I started to realize there's people going to university, even Oxford, Cambridge, and not getting a job afterwards. So I realized very young, from that age of 16, that getting an internship was the most important thing to work out what I wanted to do and how to problem solve. So I basically did an internship at web development companies since I was 16. I basically never did any of those. Ibiza, Malia, all of those shit, that was non-existent to me. I was doing Spring Week at JP Morgan, some at Goldman Sachs, and then I ended up at Google. And I was intern at Google for 9 months. Then I met Christian when I went full-time at Google, moved to Google Dublin office, met at a Google Christmas party. Interesting circumstances. I think everyone was a bit, let's say, intoxicated, but it's what it is. So ended up networking, meeting a load of people, and it was there that we actually realized that if you replaced video ads in these games with audio ads, that you'd actually be able to create a product which helped users, one, helped game developers with retention, and then also helped advertisers. Now, how do we then scale that idea? And this is what I want to talk about as, I guess, the CTO and co-founder of AudioMob, is the first thing we realized was culture. And this is some things we took a dabble of from our time at Google versus my time in banking. Yes, banking, I love all my banking people in here, don't get offended. It showed me a lot about discipline, but I think Google taught me a lot about autonomous culture and letting people build on ideas. And I think that's what we've done in terms of letting our team run autonomously to create the best ideas. The other thing is product, making sure you get your product right. And being patient with product, right? Our product was not good at all at the start. And I will say that as CTO, and I will own that, because I always understood that it will start off very bad. You always hack something together, you always build something very scrappy, in a scrappy fashion, and then you keep on iterating. So we did 2-week sprints for a whole year and a half before we got to a place where the product was ready to actually start shipping to people. Then the other thing is revenue, right? And the reason why this is important, and one of our investors is here, Inzube over here. I love how you try to hide. He was the one who really made it clear around the importance of making sure you have a really good track record of revenue, and that would mean that the investors would come to you. You would then have a much better position and much better leverage when you came to investing. Because once you have the traction and once you have the revenue, and if you don't have revenue, you might have the traction, so the users. And that was the most important thing to make sure we had. And the final thing for me, and I think one of the most important things, is do not discount feedback. Like, I hear people say just start. I fundamentally disagree with just start. I don't think anyone should just start doing anything. I think you should actually research and work out what your target market is, if people will buy it, if it is of something of interest to people, and if you therefore then have the traction and people would then also help you build and create it. So that's the final thing I'll leave you on. And then the very last thing I'll say is, also, I tweet to so many founders, I think it's really important, especially in our community, to talk about, is do not treat the investors necessarily, and I love everyone at Cornerstone, but do not necessarily treat investors as the only way and leverage them and treat them as they are above you. You have to see it as a symbiotic relationship, right? You're bringing something to the table, right? They could put their money in a bank and get a 3% or 5% interest rate. They don't want to do that. They want to put their money into your business because they may get a 3 to 10x return. And you have to understand that they're using you as a vehicle to achieve those gains, just as you need them to then get the capital. So please always remember that when you're pitching, and always pitch with confidence, always believe in your idea, and always push it forward. I'll leave it there.